everybody. Wow, that color is bright. Let me see if I can soften it a little better. Okay, how are you, everybody? I am DrDeb. It is 9 o'clock at night Eastern time, and that's why we're having another live presentation. So, hey, how are you? I am so glad you're here. And everybody, please, I say this every week, join the chat, get on and talk to me. It is so wonderful to have people talk to me. I don't feel like I'm just talking to myself and my computer, which is kind of a drag. I do it all the time, right? If I make all these videos for you guys, that's exactly how I do it. I'm talking to myself, and it's okay. I like my company, but anyway, let's get on with why people are in denial and how to stop them. And if you're out there, anybody else who has been shy and doesn't want to get on the chat, please get on so I know that you're tuning in, please. And I want to hear from everyone. So the first thing is 5 reasons why people might be in denial. And what I want to hear from you guys is this making sense? Do you agree or disagree? Did you think of something I left out? Because you know what? There's probably 20 reasons. I just came up with 5 that came to my mind, and I'm sure there could be many more. So let me know. And if something is making sense and you experienced it yourself or whatever, you want to share something with people, that will be super. If you don't like it, disagree with it, that will be great too. So reason number 1, and I think this is really important. People love their parents and they cannot hold at the same time 2 views. One that says, my parents hurt me, my parents abused me, traumatized me, or didn't go that far, but hurt me, that somehow I ended up with a wound. That's one. And at the same time, my parents were great people. They loved me. I know they love me. How is it possible that 2 of these opposite things could be true at the same time? And people who are in denial cannot envision how it is possible for 2 things like this that are opposite to be true. Examples of a very extreme nature are, for example, people who will incest their own child and yet be generous and kind to people in the community, and kind even to the rest of the family, and maybe even that child, and tell the child this is a form of love. That isn't possible, right? Well, it is. How is this possible? That's for another explanation. I can throw in a quick thing that maybe they were dissociated when they did the abuse and they literally blacked out and don't remember. Who knows? Maybe they were drunk. Maybe they needed to get themselves drunk to do that. But on a much less intense level, you can have a parent who, for example, says something to a child, you have been a nasty little girl and I don't like it, and then proceeds to tell them to go to their room and stay there for the entire day. That sounds to me like a pretty harsh punishment. But at the same time, that child growing up now can say, you know what, my parents were good parents. I was a little bit wild. I needed to be kind of made to pay the price and made to realize how bad I was. And therefore, I don't hold it against them. I had a great childhood. That was no big deal. So this one point is that, as somebody very well known to me said, People are complex. Yeah, they could be kind and they could be mean at other times. And it's the same person with the same heart that's not a bad heart, but just doesn't know how to handle people or raise children, but means well, is not bad intentioned. So that's one reason why people can be in denial. They just don't want that cognitive dissonance, which means just the process of things not fitting together mentally. That's reason number one that I proposed. Reason number two is pretty straightforward. They were traumatized and they cannot go back there for any reason. They are afraid of being re-traumatized again. Now, let me just say this about that. I'm going to develop a new playlist soon, maybe even in the next couple weeks, in which I'm going to talk about the wounds of therapy, because if a therapist does not handle therapy correctly, they can re-traumatize a traumatized person. You can't, for example, force someone who isn't ready, or even if they say they're ready, may not be ready, to go back into painful memories unless they are physiologically and mentally prepared for it. What do I mean by that? Physiologically, their body has to be calm enough. Their mind can't be racing. They have to be breathing steadily. They can't simply be ready to pass out or something like that because they're so overwhelmed and terrified. So, for an example, somebody who's been in a war zone might jump sky high when they hear some engine backfiring in the street from traffic. They cannot handle that because it's a trigger that brings them right back to their trauma. So, too, a therapist can't just bring someone back to the past, bing, 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 unless they're ready for it. The physiological part is their body has to be calm enough and able to regain that calm level when they walk out that door and be able to go back to work and kiss their kids when they walk in the door at the end of the day. A person who has been traumatized and needs and wants to go back and resolve the pain of the trauma has to be able to resume normal life when they leave the therapy office. If they can't do that, they should not be plunged into a review of their past history. So one reason why people do not want to go back is just that. They're afraid of being re-traumatized, which means literally they're not functioning anymore. They're screaming, or they're crouched on the floor, or they're not aware that this is now and not then, that they have mixed up the past and present. That would be re-traumatized, or they can't sleep anymore. They have nightmares or flashbacks. These are all signs that they were not handled properly. So that is a form of denial that is healthy, very healthy. If you're not ready, don't do it. No one should push you off the cliff. No one. Another reason why people are afraid and will stay in denial may be because they overcame their trauma, but at the time when they were being injured, they were either having terrific tempers or using or abusing drugs or alcohol or sex, doing damaging things to themselves. And what they don't want to revisit is those types of escape valves, because they want to stay clean and healthy. And they may be able to handle the trauma, but they may also not be able to handle using some crutches and escape valves that they really need in order to deal with the trauma. So that's another reason why they should not be pushed back A therapist shouldn't push them, nor should a spouse. And they may be in denial and they may want to say nothing happened. You know, I used to cut myself when I was 15, they may say. And I don't want to go back to doing that. Yes, I had a fine childhood. My childhood was fine. They don't want to revisit it because they don't want to end up facing the very thing in their memories that caused them into these escape valve mechanisms. So that's a third reason. Now, there's another reason. A fourth reason could be that they are doing to their own children exactly what was done to them, whether it's yelling, being dismissive, not taking the kids' feelings seriously, putting them down, neglecting them, either actually neglecting them, not being present, not being there, or not feeding them, or emotional neglect, ignoring them, just not talking to them, not being there for them. It could be any number of things that we might call subtle abuse. Let me tell you something. It could be subtle, but it doesn't necessarily hurt less. Subtle abuse does just as much damage as big time obvious abuse. So that kind of abuse also is something that if they're doing it themselves to their children, they don't want to have to take stock and say, oh, what was done to me is abuse, so that I really need to stop doing what I'm doing to my children because I'm abusing them. That may be correct. That may be the right position to take, and they may be too unable to fight against the triggers within them that cause them to want to take those steps. So unfortunately, you end up having a situation where they'd rather just deny the past because then they don't have to face the present. So that's the fourth. I'm going to stop here before I go further and just check with everyone here. Does anyone have questions? Does anyone disagree? Does anyone want to comment? Does anyone have things to add? I'd just love to hear from you guys, as I always say. I am going to plow forward. Thank you. You agree so far. Number 5. Let's say a person entered a marriage in which they themselves had a very harsh childhood, and now they're being treated badly all over again in their marriage. However, for whatever reason, the person that they're married to is treating their kids fine. Or at least their perception is they're treating the kids fine, and the kid loves that parent, and you don't want to break up the family because you feel like it's in the best interest of the children to stay in a whole family. So you stay with that person, you're miserable, but how miserable is an important point. Because if you start to admit how miserable you are in this current marriage, then you have to also admit that this is exactly what my parents did to me. And if I'm miserable now, I must have been miserable then. And when you start connecting the dots, what you end up discovering is that the miserable childhood kind of prepared you. You got used to being treated that way, so it prepared you for the miserable marriage. And that is very painful. And it's even more painful if you decide you're not going to leave. Because then if you're not going to leave, you're ending up kind of eating garbage. There's another word I'm not going to use on air. I think you know what word I may mean. Because then what you're doing is saying, I am doing this to myself. And so instead of doing that, you say, it's not so bad now, and it wasn't so bad then. And you stay in current denial. Or you say, well, it's kind of bad now, but you don't want to see the origins of how you got primed for it, how you got prepared for it by having the childhood that you had. It's easier to simply say, no, my childhood was fine. It all started with this ongoing problem coming from my spouse that I'm married to today. So that's another reason why a person might be in denial. So now we get to the question, what do you do about it? Oh, wait. Are you saying that the person attracted it? Well, the word attracted is a little bit blaming, and I don't like the idea of victim blaming. I am just saying, let me put it in a little bit more kindly tone. Let's say a person had a parent or parents who were insensitive. They weren't terribly abusive, but they were insensitive. They did not get the child's feelings. A child could start to think, well, maybe my feelings are wrong. Maybe I shouldn't have feelings like that. A child could also start to think, I'm a loser. There's something wrong with me. Now, when they meet someone who seems to treat them well at first, and then they get married, and then that person doesn't treat them well, they may be thinking, well, I'm a loser, and that's why this person, who's not very nice, was willing to take me on, because a really nice person might not. So it's kind of the way you start to see yourself. I think that's a really good question, because I don't like thinking in terms of people attracting something bad to themselves and kind of proving through that they were messed up. I rather say it like this. When a person's been injured, unless they have the therapy to kind of pull apart all the coping mechanisms, what I've called parts in IFS, that have covered their true beautiful self, they don't realize that they have that true beautiful self. And so they kind of go flawed or feeling flawed into the relationship. And it stands to reason that they're going to end up with somebody who they're used to and comfortable with the kind of treatment that they got. And even though it's not nice treatment, they feel like that's their lot in life. That's who I am, and that's who would be the person who has the most in common with me, who shares a worldview with me. Not that they attracted something bad because there's something flawed about them, but we've attracted somebody who's kind of been there where we've been. They have the same problems, so we're sort of attracted to each other. Does that sound better? Does that give a more broad picture to you? Okay, good. Thank you. I do believe that our heart is drawn to someone who shares something with us, even if we're not conscious of it. So if they had a bad childhood and we had a bad childhood, it makes sense. When I married my husband, I never thought of my childhood as bad, nor did I think of his mom as bad. His father had died, and she wasn't. I really had a good relationship with her. However, she was insensitive to him, and my mom was insensitive to me. Not in a catastrophic way, but just enough that we did have that in common, and it affected us in the same way. It's sort of a trauma bond connection. I just don't like that. Really is an excellent topic for another live. I don't like the term trauma bond. It implies that a person is broken, that a person is somehow defective, and I hate that. You know, if someone breaks my arm, I now have a broken arm, but it's not my fault. They broke it, and it's broken, and it needs to heal. It's not that I did something wrong. You see what I mean? But I think we can go over that. That's a great topic. I like that topic. I have a book on that on my other room. What's the name of the author? I'll get it in my head later. But yeah, maybe we'll do that. Yeah, a life experience connection. Yeah, yeah. We just are drawn to people, I feel like, on an unconscious level, a spiritual level, who we share something with, something very deep. And then, of course, we have the opposite attract phenomenon that goes along with it. But so some of those things are opposite and some of those things are shared. But I do want to make a note of that trauma bond as a future topic. Okay, so now we get to the question, what do we do about it? How do we handle being married to that kind of person? What do we do next? Let me tell you what you should not do, in my humble opinion. You cannot confront a person like that. You cannot put the nails to them, put the screws to them, and say, well, you did this, and don't you realize that? And what do you think your parent was if they did such and such? You know, I have a client whose mother is very abusive. The client's 45, for crying out loud, a grown-up with grown-up children. And her mother will say, I can say anything I want. I'm your mother. Now, I haven't met the mother, but this certainly sounds abusive to me. And I said something to her once about limiting contact. And she said, you know, my mother was also a very good mother. We had a happy childhood. And right back to point number one, how do you hold both in your hand? But I think it's true. I think you can have a person who means well. To this day, that same mother will come over and help out if she's needed for something. You know, they'll have family dinners together with the mother and father and this lady's husband and herself and their children. They have both. It's very hard, but they juggle both. And when I tentatively, I'm the therapist now, I'm not a friend, I'm a therapist, said, well, that was very abusive, she right away went to defend herself. My mother is also a good mother. I also have happy memories. Sometimes elderly people lose their filters. No, actually, that's interesting you say that. This lady remembers being 8 years old and hearing a lost filter. She was not spoken to well, even as a child. She does remember the childhood. It's literally both. Literally both. A mother can be very kind. She can bring over food. Oh, you're sick, here, I made you chicken soup. She can do all those nice things. But then, like, her daughter did something and she said, well, why did she do that? I mean, like, come on. You know, it's she thinks she could just say anything now, and she did then, and that's how she is. But she was a good mother. In some ways, she was a kind and loving mother, you know? So as soon as I tiptoed into a confrontation, I got stopped. Surely you can't do it. Anybody who tries to confront someone like that, I guarantee the person will walk out on you and not talk to you, and that's the end of it. You cannot confront. In fact, you'll get into a big argument, and I want you to hear this statement I'm going to make. We use reason to support being irrational. We use reason to justify and support how irrational we are. How do we do that? God only knows how we do it. If you love reading, here's a book, David Eagleman, Incognito, The Secret Lives of the Brain. And what he's saying, he's really talking from a brain point of view. Many people who follow me don't want to hear about this. I don't know who does, but I love this brain stuff, in which he explains how the brain works so that the left brain can explain the feelings of the right brain. And it's fascinating, all the experiments that were done. But the bottom line is we're basically emotional people that are irrational, and we try to figure out a way of explaining ourselves. And we call that reason, we call that rationality. And all it is supporting irrationality. Right now, if you look at the news in the world, it's exactly that. Anybody looking at it will see how irrational it is. But I don't want to go there because this is not a political station or channel. But do not try to argue your way with somebody like that. It will not work. What you can do, and these are my suggestions, is you can appeal to that person's good heart because, like I said, they have both. They may be in denial about pain that they have received. They may be in denial about pain they're dishing out. That doesn't make them a bad person. That was my number one. There is both. Appeal to their good heart and say, we need therapy. Notice we, not you need therapy. People have done that. And if a person is really strong, they may take their spouse up on it and come in alone and say, okay, I need therapy. And I've had mostly men, interestingly enough, who say, my wife is fed up with me, I need therapy. God bless them. Most people won't go, that will not go well with them. Instead, you say, we need therapy, and you go to the right marriage counselor, and I can give you a list, depending on what state you're in, of who I would recommend based on their therapy model, their therapy outlook, which you could read my playlist situations and my playlist. We have the way to fix I'll substitute a word, bad marriage. I have another word in there and I use a bleep to cover it up. Then how do you connect with them at an emotional level? Well, this is my thought. Many such people are good-hearted. My mother was insensitive because she was very deeply hurt herself. And my father was the kindest man on earth. And he felt for her. He felt that good person inside underneath all that. And he loved her for that. And he loved me too. So I at least got a father that wasn't insensitive. And that's it. So if they will go to therapy, if they will go, then hopefully the therapist will have the skill to help them express their true emotions, the good ones and the bad ones, and they'll all be accepted by the therapist and kind of laid out to look at on the table so that the person can then decide how he wants to conduct his life going forward, or she, whoever it is. But I strongly recommend therapy. If a person will not go to therapy and part of them is emotionally cut off, you're not going to get that. You're just not. There's nothing you're going to be able to do to bring it out, because as one part of their emotions were to open up, the good part, it'll open up bad emotions as well. There's another book that I'm reading actually for the second time, and then it looks like, it's time to finish up here. Babette Rothschild, um, um, something about trauma, revolutionizing trauma treatment. And it's all about being ultra careful as a therapist to help a person with their breathing and their feelings of being in the here and now, as opposed to being taken quickly back to their traumas. It's like a really slow process of just stabilizing people who are so distressed that they can't even tell the past from the present, and they're so upset about it. So it just goes to show you how carefully you have to work with someone like that who's been traumatized to open their feelings up. And she gave an example of a guy who said to her, I want to feel, but I am numb. I was in the war. I saw my buddies blown up, and I just have gone numb. And this person functions. He has a job, he has a marriage and kids and everything, but I want to feel. So they start the session in which he says, I don't even remember how it feels to love my wife. And then she sees he's starting to tear up, and she stops him. She really goes slow with allowing those feelings. And she said, going numb for you was a resource. It was a good, helpful coping mechanism. Let's see if you can bring that on a little bit. And he did. He was able to kind of numb out again. How did you do it? He clenched his jaw. He held his breath for a moment. He stopped his thoughts. He was so used to being able to do that. So, unfortunately, a person who has been shut down emotionally has done that out of need. And if they no longer need it, they just can't tell that. Their reactions are in the past when they needed it. Even though you can ask them, well, it's 2024, you can ask them, but it's not going to actually change how they feel inside. It doesn't feel like that. As we say in IFS, internal family systems, there's a part of them that's still 6 years old, and maybe many parts that are frightened and have shut down. And that's why it takes the great skill of a kindly, compassionate therapist that knows how to go slow in awakening those feelings. Now, the only thing I could say when a person refuses to go to therapy is they can listen to this video. They can listen to many others that I have done, and I'm going to start posting the old ones when I can catch up a little bit. And they'll see that many therapists are kind, sensitive, respectful of all their coping mechanisms, and compassionate so that they can go slow at their pace to open up their feelings. Now, a word of announcements. I am not going to be doing a live next week or the week after. I am going away, and I'm going to have a much needed, complete vacation. I haven't done anything in like 18 months. I haven't been to a restaurant for a slice of pizza. I make it myself. I need a vacation. So for 2 weeks, thank you. I'll be on break. But I love your idea about the trauma bond. That's a great topic for the future. Thank you so much. And everyone else who has been too shy to get on or who will see this later, take care, be well. Great having you. And make comments. Make comments and get notifications. Subscribe and get notifications so that you'll be able to find out when my next live is and other stuff that I post. Take care.